All right, good morning, everybody. With me today, I have Jay Noddle here, who is chairman of the Omaha Streetcar Authority, Nick Statham, who's Associate Vice President and Senior Project Manager at HDR, and also the Project Manager for Omaha Streetcar Consultant. That's a mouthful. You're busy. Matt Tondel is the Senior Vice President at HDR, Public Works Director Bob Stubbe, and Planning Director Dave Fanslaw. Greater Omaha Chamber and CEO, President CEO Heath Mello is here. Thank you for being here. And Steve Jensen, who is, where did he go? Who is former planning director, who is now deputy chief of staff for economic development in my office, and many others that have been involved in the Omaha Streetcar Project. We have completed the 30% design of the Omaha's modern streetcar. This morning, we're going to show you conceptual designs for the stations at 16 streetcar stops, the vehicle maintenance facility, and the power stations that will be built along the route. The Planning Department has reviewed the design and has recommended approval by the Urban Design Review Board. City Code requires the Urban Design Review Board's review and approval of projects that are related to public buildings or streetscapes at the early stage of design. The board will meet on November 16th. During the 30% design process, a recommendation was made to modify the route. The western end, the western terminus, is now proposed at 39th Street and Farnham on the west side, the west terminus, instead of 42nd Street. And the 10th and Capitol on the north, or at 10th and Capitol on the north in the first phase of construction. The changes will allow the University of Nebraska Medical Center to complete the evaluation of the streetcar extension through their campus and potentially to the Saddle Creek campus. Moving the stop to 10th and Capitol allows, rather than 10th and Cass, allows for options for future extensions up north. These changes will require approval from the Omaha Streetcar Authority. HDR is designing our streetcar system, and Nick Statham, who is here, will now explain some of the features. Nick?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. As the Mayor mentioned, we want to walk you through a sampling of some of the slides that will be presented to the Urban Design Review Board coming up next week. The first image we see here is a typical side stop. This location is at 26th and Farnham. The Mayor mentioned there's going to be 16 stops on the route. The majority, 13 of the stops, will be a side stop, so this is kind of a typical configuration of what those will look like. A couple of key features that we want to highlight with this stop. First of all, the dimensions. They're approximately 100 feet long, and they're 8 feet wide. They're going to sit within parking trays along the existing roadway corridor, so they'll actually come out from the sidewalk. Those will have some definition between the sidewalk behind and the stop itself, with some landscape buffers or some other streetscape elements that you can see there on the image. The idea is that it separates the sidewalk. People that are walking up and down the street can continue to do so. Access to businesses is maintained, and then the streetcar riders will be out a little bit out into the street. The platform itself will have a raised center section. You can see that in the image in the middle. That allows for level boarding, ADA compliant level boarding, so that's a roll-off, roll-on boarding scenario. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the vehicle update. The shelters shown in the middle of that stop are conceptual right now. We'll have some more detail in a moment, but the idea is to have a small shelter in the middle of the platform to help give some definition to the space and have a place for people to sit as they wait for the car. We're also looking at having real-time arrival signs at the stops. So that sign is shown there, that small white image. That would provide a next train arrival information to folks that are on the platform. Next slide. The next image here is a sample of our center platforms. So 3 of those 16 stops will be a center platform. They'll be located between Turner and 37th in the Midtown and Blackstone areas. The reason why the design team pivoted to these center stops, a couple of reasons. One, with the grades in these areas, the center stop gave us some more flexibility to tie the platform into the surrounding geometry of the roadway. The second, there's some narrower sidewalks, especially within Blackstone, so having these center platforms helps to alleviate that pressure on those sidewalks. The roadway section through these areas is predominantly a 3-lane section, so 1 lane in each direction in the center turn lane, So these center platforms will take the space of that shared center turn lane where they're located. So a couple of elements to call out in this image. This particular image is at 34th and Farnham. So access to the platforms will be through crosswalk locations. That also helps to shorten the crossing length for people getting on and off the streetcar, provide some traffic calming to the corridor as well. Once they enter that center median location, then they can walk up a ramp and get to that same elevated level boarding section that we talked about for the side stop locations. Shelters on these stops would likely be two-sided with overhead canopies facing in either direction. These stops as well would have real-time arrival signs, one for each direction. These stops would be a little bit wider than the side stops, between 12 and 14 feet wide. That would allow active boarding on both sides of the platform. So one platform will serve both eastbound and westbound streetcars at the same location. Next slide. So here's a conceptual image of what the shelters may look like. The project will go out for an RFP for the shelters later in the design phase. So the actual definition of that shelter will be dependent on the selected vendor. There are numerous vendors out there that can offer a shelter similar to this. The key aspects of the shelter would be an overhead canopy, providing that coverage. The backing, we're looking at a perforated metal back wall to have some separation from the sidewalk behind. That back wall would allow for placement of signage or other images on the wall, and then side walls for some wind protection, and then bench seating within the shelter itself. Next slide, please. So switching gears, this is our maintenance facility, current conceptual rendering. So this facility is located in the existing Lot A of the Mecca facility. The maintenance facility is approximately 36,000 square feet. It is a two-story building. The first floor of the building is predominantly set aside for vehicle maintenance, streetcar vehicle maintenance. There will be 3 bays where the vehicles are able to enter the maintenance facility, perform routine maintenance, heavy overhaul maintenance, as well as a vehicle wash facility. The upper floor of the building will be predominantly reserved for administrative space, offices, conference facilities, training facilities for the Streetcar Authority and their staff. The facility will be secure, fenced, and will also allow for additional vehicle storage outside of the building. So at the end of the day, all 6 vehicles within the fleet will be stored here at this facility. This next image is an example of our traction power substation, TPSS for short. The system will have 3 of these along the route. What these do is convert AC power from the grid to DC power that will feed the overhead lines for the system. The project has gone through a load flow analysis. We are looking at a hybrid off-wire, on-wire system. So the locations of these substations was developed based on that analysis, and where we'll have the wire, where we will not have the wire. The current design has 3 locations for these substations. One is at Turner and Farnham, which is the image we're seeing here. Another is at 24th and Farnham, and the last location is at 16th and Douglas. Want to highlight for this image here, the structures themselves are roughly 15 by 30 feet in dimension, 8 to 10 feet tall. Again, they'll be vendor driven once we go out for RFPs at the end of the design phase. That will change the dimensions slightly. For this image here, we're looking at adding a brick facade to the building, help it blend into its surroundings a little bit better. Also look to have some landscape buffers. This location is on the western side of the green space on the west side of Turner. So as you can see, our intent is to make that blend into the surroundings kind of disappear within the streetscape once it's constructed. So these images here are some examples we received earlier this year from potential vendors for our streetcar, modern streetcar. A couple of key aspects for the bid, which is currently out on the street. We are looking for 6 modern streetcars for the vehicle fleet. The actual length of the streetcars will vary depending on the vendor, but we're looking at lengths between 16 to 80 feet long. All of the vehicles will be 8 foot 8 inches wide. They will also allow for level boarding. So the center doors for all of these vehicles have level boarding mechanisms in them. So as they pull up to the stop, they are able to meet ADA boarding requirements at that platform. Again, it's a roll-on, roll-off situation for folks using the stop. They are also going to be a hybrid traction power system. So these vehicles are able to operate both on-wire and off-wire. The off-wire segments will use onboard battery storage within the vehicles. That battery will be charged as the vehicle is operating in an on-wire section. There will also be some charging infrastructure at each ends of the alignment to allow for rapid charging when the vehicle does its switchover. But using the onboard energy storage, we're able to run approximately 40% of the alignment off-wire.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, Nick will be available as well as others for questions after we are finished here. But after the review by the Urban Design Review Board, the design also will require approval from the Omaha Streetcar Authority. Jay Noddle is the chairman of the authority, and I wanted to ask Jay to come forward and say a few words.
Oops. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here this morning. On behalf of the Omaha Streetcar Authority, I would just like to say we're excited to be here today. This is really the community's first opportunity to see images that are a product of a tremendous amount of work that the design team has been undertaking. There will be more events like this as time goes on and as the details of other parts of the project become more clear and are ready for to show to the community. The project is on schedule, and as Nick and the mayor have both mentioned, there will be some approvals that the Streetcar Authority Board is asked to provide as we work through the next couple months. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Jay. HDR is now working on the 60% design, and that is expected to be complete by the end of the year. Other important updates. Advertisements for bids for the purchase of the modern streetcar were published November 1st. The Omaha Streetcar Authority plans to buy 6 cars. Bids will be open January 24th, with the selection of the car maker expected in February of 2024. Bid highlights include the length of the cars, width and capacity, the ADA required level boarding, and off-wire capability for up to 40% of the route. We have talked often about extending the initial streetcar route. We have applied for a $300,000 federal grant through the U.S. Department of Transportation to study an extension to North Omaha. This route will connect riders to jobs, education, and services, and create commercial and mixed-use developments and affordable housing along the route. The city will provide a 50% local match through a combination of funding and in-kind support. And finally, we showed you the station design for the streetcar stops. This month, future streetcar boarding zone signs, we have those here? There they are, right there, will be installed at all of those locations so that you could see actually where they are going to be. The signs also, as you can see, they include a QR code so that you can learn more about the boarding zones.